The East Africa Community is an intergovernmental organization comprised of 7 countries in the East Africa region. These countries include the Democratic Republic of Congo, the United Republic of Tanzania, the republics of Kenya, Burundi, Rwanda, South Sudan, and Uganda. And while all of these countries are rich in agricultural resources, minerals, livestock, and honestly, some of the most beautiful landscapes in the world, I have to say, Kenya is really leading the charge of the East African community with its own respect into the development, the industry, and the talent that is located in the country of Kenya. And so in this video, I want to talk about the economic differences that I experienced, right, during my short trip to Kenya versus those of Tanzania. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Ashley. On my channel, Ashley in Africa, I talk about my experience living, moving, and doing business on the continent of Africa. I share my experience of love, motherhood, and entrepreneurship. And I'm also the creator of the Africa Investors Academy, a community of entrepreneurs, professionals, and aspiring entrepreneurs who are interested in growing their business, starting their business, or investing in projects here on the continent of Africa to retire early. So if that sounds interesting to you, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and like the content so you get updates on when I post new content next. And, you know, I share a lot of content on the differences that I'm experiencing as I travel this continent. And my approach and my intention is purely to share my insight as somebody who has a passion for business and a passion for economics. And it is no way to compare or pit countries against each other. And while I recognize that these friendly rivalries do exist on the continent, as do people in the US, right? I think specifically in the African American community, like people from New York always have something to say about people from Florida. And then people from Florida have something to say about what's going on in Georgia or LA, Cali, Chicago. So this is something that is culturally within us, right? This friendly banter about whose city, whose town is best. And I am coming at it from an economic perspective for those that have an interest in doing business and getting invested. And while opportunities are rich all over this continent, I simply share my experience from my time spent in said country, right? And so in this video, I want to talk about the economic differences that I experienced between Kenya and Tanzania, right? So Kenya and Tanzania, nobody is better than the other. These are simply the economic differences that I saw and the differences that are essentially leading the charge with Kenya really at the helm of East Africa community's growth, right? So the first thing we're going to talk about is development and infrastructure. Kenya wins, right, in comparison to Tanzania. The roads, the Wi-Fi, the connectivity, the talent for employment, tourism, infrastructure, the roads, the railways, the airports, the processed resorts, all of that, Kenya is really at the helm of this. And while I myself lived in Tanzania for 2 years, the tourism, fantastic, the roads are still developing, right? There's still some development to be done. And while I recognize the historical aspect of colonization of Kenya and the consistent presence of the Western and Eastern influence in Kenya, this has a big part to do with it, right? The fact that London, UK, America, China has been heavily involved in the development of Kenya. It has really pushed Kenya ahead of the game when looking at some of these other countries in the East Africa community, specifically Tanzania, as it pertains to the infrastructure and the development of its country, right? And so they're doing amazing. Kenya wins. As far as foreign investment, Kenya wins again, right? I believe that the systems that are created around doing business in Kenya as a foreigner protects you as an investor. They're very clear. Well, let me say, very, very clear. And you know that when you're doing business in Kenya, you essentially have a system in place, a legal system in place that protects you as a foreign investor, right? It's a lot more clearer than said currently in Tanzania, which is growing, right? What they're doing specifically in Zanzibar is going to be really revolutionary for Tanzania, and I'm excited to see what that looks like in the future. But for now, Kenya really is winning. Tanzania still has an opportunity for investment. There's a bit more risk there, but as we know as investors, with more risk comes even more reward. But currently, and for the last several decades, Kenya has won with foreign investment in the areas of tourism, construction, residential development. On my flight back from Mombasa to Nairobi, I met someone. Where was he from? He was traveling to Dubai that day. I want to say he was Somalian. But he was born in Kenya, actually born in Mombasa. I want to say second generation. And he himself had heavy ties in construction and development, residential and commercial. He was also working on some innovation around solar light fixtures for Mombasa. And there was just a ton of opportunity he was talking about, specifically in the city of Mombasa, which is where the largest port in Kenya is located. And so he also had a telecom business in Tanzania and still does. And he talked about the difference in doing business in both spaces and how he'll probably never spend a ton more time in Tanzania. He's made more money in Tanzania in 1 month than he may make in Kenya in a year. And so his personal experience justified the risk that he was willing to take by doing business. But he definitely said there's a lot of money to be made in Tanzania. You just have to be willing to take the risk. So that was a great insight for someone who has done business in both markets. The next thing is industry, right? So Samsung is a major producer, has a major hub in Nairobi. I think this may be changing with things that have been happening recently in geopolitics between the West and China, but Samsung has a huge manufacturing plant in Nairobi, or right outside Nairobi in Kenya. And so with the presence of Samsung, with the presence of mobile money and telecom, mobile money having been started in Nairobi by a non-African Kenyan, I would like to say it was made aware to me, but non-African Kenyan, like, isn't that, I think Africans in general, Africans are a dynamic people. They are multiverse, multilingual, multinational, and they're African, right? So someone said I should mention it, but really that's Africa, right? And, their network, right, is strong. And this is because of the community that exists in Kenya that are developing these things, right? Agriculture is huge, avocados, huge high quality crop, coffee, huge high quality global crop. Processing is happening and being developed in Kenya. They are actively looking to become an industrialized country, and they're doing it. And I saw it being done while I was there. And then tourism, right, is huge. The national park being in Nairobi, one of the national parks being in Nairobi, in the capital city, which is unheard of. There is no other country in the world with a capital city and a national park in that capital city. No other city, country in the world, right? Restaurants are 5-star, resorts are 5-star. It has a presence of industry that attracts and is globally competitive. They win, right? Tanzania has great tourism, and they do have 5-star resorts and restaurants. I don't know about 5-star restaurants, but 5-star resorts definitely do exist in Tanzania. Hyatt, the Park Hyatt, the Four Seasons, Serengeti. There are a few. right? But Tanzania still has a far way to go, and they're working on it, and they're building, and they're growing. And again, there's huge opportunity in these sectors of agriculture, of telecom, of tourism, of manufacturing, right? Of industrialization. There's huge opportunity in Tanzania. But in this case, Kenya wins, right? So the next thing, middle class. Kenya wins. Kenya has a very large middle class. There are extremely large middle class neighborhoods in Kenya. And this must be said about the way the societies are run, right? So for the longest time, Tanzania was a socialism ran society. It was a socialist society. Kenya, for the longest, Nairobi has been a capitalist country and city. And with that means foreign investment. So you have a lot of international professionals there working abroad, working remotely. So the option with the connectivity is bringing foreign money a lot faster into this country of Kenya. And so thus you're gonna have a faster growth of trade, of industry, of economic growth, right? And that is happening in Kenya. They're winning. But Tanzania is doing really well. They're doing well. I would say the infrastructure makes it really hard to support that level of attraction of talent, attraction of foreign professionals, because the ability, the connectivity, and the infrastructure that's needed to attract that type of community of people that are going to continue to invest in your society, you know, isn't there yet. But again, huge opportunity for people that are looking to enter into a market with that type of trajectory. The next thing, diversity, right? So Kenya wins. Kenya with the presence of Somali, Nigerians, DRC, Tanzanians, Chinese, German, French, Italians, right? Like, Kenya wins. There, again, that type of infrastructure that attracts people from all over the world exists in Kenya. And Tanzania, you know, it's growing, it's doing its job. I will say, again, what is happening in Zanzibar to create some of these policies and these investment opportunities for foreigners to come to Zanzibar is something really promising and something to look at and to pay attention to. And for people that are a part of the Africa Investors Academy, we'll be taking a look live this year in 2023 and doing an Investor Academy live event in Zanzibar. So stay tuned for that, because there are some really cool things happening in Zanzibar around tech, industry, economic development opportunities to specifically work with Zanzibaris, Tanzanians on their land and on the projects that are going to help the country of Tanzania grow, but very intentionally with an opportunity to also see value in your investment. So stay tuned for that for people that are a part of the Africa Investors Academy. If you are not, be sure to join us in the Investors Academy via the link below. And so, yes, as I mentioned, that diversity exists in Kenya, and it's been there for years. The Airbnb that we were staying at in Mombasa, massive villa, like 5 bedrooms, massive. If you've seen me post anything of Kenya content, you saw me post that villa probably 3 times on my Instagram. So if you're not following me on Instagram, feel free to go ahead and check me out over there. Yeah, it was owned by a Chinese man. And in fact, the entire gated community that was about 8 villas, it was either 8 or 12, all oceanfront, owned by this Chinese man who came to Kenya in the 70s and got his money from starting clubs and liquor stores in Kenya. So specifically in the Mombasa and Diani region. So diversity essentially is an economic driver for growth, and you're bringing in people with different perspectives, different ideas, different solutions to solve problems. And it's definitely present in Kenya, and thus Kenya is winning in this aspect. The last but importantly, not least, aspect of the economic differences of Kenya and Tanzania is talent. Kenya has made a huge investment in its technology and its connectivity. Their foreign companies are coming there, they are recruiting there, and education is top notch, right? When I was talking about my daughters and talking about my potential, actually at the time I was planning to move to South Africa. When I was there in Nairobi and Diani, when I would speak to people who had children, they were like, yeah, we have better schools here, you know, in Kenya, we've got some of the best schools. And they were like really boastful. That's all I heard everybody talk about was the schools. And so, you know, parents feel the way that they feel about schools, because if they hate the school, they're going to tell you that too, or they're going to talk about it. If it's too expensive, they did talk about how expensive it was. So again, for people that have an interest in education or innovation around education, huge opportunity there. But the talent is there in Kenya. And so with that, they're able to attract companies. They're able to attract businesses who want to set up and work and do business and hire the talent that exists. And I do understand that there is a challenge currently in Kenya with these really extremely talented and educated professionals that are looking for work. And if you're a Kenyan and you're watching this video, I always advocate for entrepreneurship. It leads to financial, you know, financial independence, and you work for yourself. You don't have to work for anybody else. And it takes time, it takes capital, it takes resilience, and it does take some, you know, some consistency and some grit. But I believe African people as a whole have what it takes around entrepreneurship. It isn't for everybody, but for those that are young, you have an opportunity to expose your gifts to the world in this global economy that we're living in, and potentially even put yourself online, you know, to share your gifts, to share your talent, see if you might be able to attract a foreign company that might be interested or have an opportunity to hire you abroad, you know? So that's my insight for the immaculate, incredible talent that is in Kenya. And that is essentially globally competitive in the East African community. And so I don't want to say that the talent in Kenya is better than the talent in Tanzania. It's not all what I'm saying, but I do think that with the access of information and the access of global infrastructure has created a very aware, a hyper-aware group of individuals. And so many of the presidents, former and present, have said that the fact that they have this level of internet connectivity is so that they can have a community of people that are exposed, that are aware of what's happening, and that have an intellectual capability to compete globally. So that's my perspective on the economic differences between Kenya and Tanzania. If you like this video, please be sure to like it and share it with someone who would find value in it. And if you have an interest in learning more about what I share on this channel in regards to economic opportunities, business growth, and investor opportunities, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next video.